Hello and welcome to this episode of In Discussion With from Medical Update Online. Today I'm talking to Lisa Jamieson about nutritional supplements, medicines and deprescribing and how these all fit together. Could you start by introducing yourself?
Hi, yes, my name's Lisa Jamieson and I'm a pharmacist by background and my job role at the moment is as a pharmacist consultant.
And can you give us a brief overview of your current role, what your job involves?
Yeah, sure. So I have a portfolio type career and I have two main roles. The first one is I work as a senior consultant in a market access consultancy, and I work at the interface between the pharmaceutical industry and the NHS. And my other role, I work as a pharmacist consultant in the realm of nutritional medicine, and a lot of that involves educating pharmacists and other healthcare professionals, either in the written form or as a speaker at conferences.
Now, you have master's degrees in both pharmacy and nutritional medicine. How did that come about?
At the start of my career, I was a community pharmacist, and quite soon after qualifying, I decided that I wanted to do a clinical pharmacy MSc, and that was so that I could work in general practice. So I was one of the first and youngest primary care pharmacists, started that role in the late 1990s. And then I did that role for about 10 years. And then I moved sideways still in the NHS, working in clinical commissioning, planned care service redesign. And whilst doing that role, I decided that I wanted to do an additional MSc, and that was in nutritional medicine. And that then led into having this portfolio type career where I work in consultancy in market access, but also in consultancy related to nutritional medicine. And whilst I was doing my second MSc, I did some research in nutrition in a condition that was related to my own managing my own health through nutrition.
Hmm. Now, I'd like to focus on the idea that getting the right nutritional supplements could obviate the need for some medicines. Can you talk to us about that and give us some examples?
So I tend to think of things in terms of it's important to get diet right first before we go down the route of nutrient supplements. I think as pharmacists, we often think of nutrient supplements as being a key way to manage nutrition, but I think it's really important to stress that diet needs to be addressed first. However, even with people trying to get the optimal diet, there will be some scenarios where people do need to take nutrient supplements in addition to trying to have the best diet that they can have. So, for example, magnesium is a substance that over the last 60 years or so, the content of the magnesium in our fruits and vegetables has reduced by about 20 to 30%. So even with a really good diet that's full of, nutritious fruits, vegetables, nuts, other good sources of magnesium, we still may not be getting enough within our diet. So, and then also through processing food, we also lose magnesium when we process food. So even with a good diet, you may still be lacking in some nutrients, and therefore there may be scenarios where nutrient supplements are needed in addition to diet.
Very interesting. But skeptics will be troubled because sometimes the hypothesis seems very good, like, for example, omega-3 supplements, fish oils for eczema. But then the randomized controlled trials and meta-analyses of randomized controlled trials return equivocal results. How can that be? What's going on here?
I think it's really important to consider about when we look at hypothesis generating research, so observational studies. When it comes to nutrition, we're looking at often whole diets or whole foods. So, for example, if you look at the observational research that says that fish oil, for example, or eating fish is beneficial for health in terms of, cardiovascular disease outcomes, various other disease outcomes. When we then try and apply the pharmaceutical model to that, we take fish oil out of the fish and put it in a capsule. But when you eat fish, you get much more than just fish oil. You get lots of other nutrients in there as well. You get protein, you get zinc, you get iodine, you get various other nutrients that go alongside that are incorporated within the fish. So when you take just one element of that food out and then put it into a capsule to apply to try to replicate what you've seen in the observational studies, there may be confounding factors because you may be giving a supplement to people who have a good diet, you may be giving a supplement to people who have a poor diet, and often those factors are not taken into consideration in intervention studies. In intervention studies, we often, factor in things like age or medication, but often diet is not necessarily seen as a confounding. So there are elements of interventional studies that may have confounding factors in them, but also when you consider the supplement versus the whole food, they're not the same, they're not equivalent. And so the other thing that we also need to consider with regards to nutrition research is this idea that observational study is only hypothesis generating, but actually we need to start to think beyond that. So, for example, when we say that smoking causes cancer, we know that only from observational research. We haven't done randomized controlled trials to look at whether smoking can cause cancer, but we still use that word cause. And you can prove causality from observational research. When you look at the Bradford-Hill criteria to look at, and that's how smoking causes cancer was deemed as a causal factor. When you look at the effect size, whether or not the research is reproducible, whether or not there's any kind of plausible mechanism, these are all kinds of factors that you can look at when looking at observational research. And therefore, we need to think beyond only looking at intervention studies with individual nutrients. We still need to look at whole diets and keep doing more and more observational research to see if the effects are reproducible in the long term.
You mentioned the Bradford-Hill criteria. Can you remind us what those are?
Well, I don't have the whole list to hand, but there are, within the Bradford-Hill criteria, there are factors that relate to things like consistency. So whether or not there are lots of studies showing the same thing, whether or not there is how strong the evidence is, and again, whether the strength of the evidence is reproduced through various different observational studies. A dose response. So if you have more of a particular, like again for cancer, the more you smoke, does that increase your likelihood of cancer? Again, if you eat more of a certain food, does that increase a certain the response? So it's looking at the whole diet can be quite tricky because obviously there are many different factors. But again, I think people are starting to be a little bit more open-minded about the fact that if we have lots of observational studies that look for these elements of causality, if it's reproduced time and time again across lots of different studies, and these criteria, there are several within the Bradford-Hill criteria, then that could potentially show us that eating a certain way is causal in terms of how we see certain disease states or even managing disease as well.